Well, turning overseas now, CTV News has confirmed that more than 400 Canadians will be able to leave Gaza as early as tomorrow. The Global Affairs email obtained by CTV says that Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and eligible family members will be able to leave Gaza through the Rafah border. Now, the email also mentions that Canada does not determine who will be ultimately permitted to enter Egypt at the border crossing, but that if they are permitted, they would be allowed to stay in Egypt for a maximum of 3 days. The agency is asking Canadians to be ready to leave when they get direct word from Canadian officials. Speaking in Washington yesterday afternoon, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau repeated his call for humanitarian pause to fighting in Gaza and the West Bank. He talked about efforts to get Canadians out of Gaza.
On the issue of Canadians and their families in Gaza, we are encouraged by the assurances that Minister Joly received from Israel and from Egypt that Canadians and their families will be able to leave Gaza in the coming days. We will not stop until all Canadians are brought out to safety.
Israeli Defense Forces have released footage showing tanks and soldiers operating in the northern Gaza Strip. IDF says during fighting on Friday, troops engaged with 15 Hamas terrorists in the northern Gaza Strip, killing several of them. The Israeli military says it also targeted several Hamas outposts with tank fire and discovered tunnel shafts that were being used, in their opinion, for terror purposes. Now, Israeli forces have also hit an ambulance outside of the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. The IDF says a number of Hamas militants were killed who were using the ambulance to transport weapons. According to Gazan health authorities, at least 15 civilians were killed and 50 wounded in the attack. They also say the ambulance was evacuating wounded people from the north to the south of besieged territory. A senior Israeli official says Hamas had a control center under the hospital.
We know that there have been documented cases in the past of Hamas using ambulances. We know that Hamas has built infrastructure, military infrastructure, their command posts underneath hospitals. We saw what Hamas was capable of doing when they invaded Israel and massacred our people. They raped, they burnt people alive, they shot young people in a ravine who were attending an open-air concert. They shot children in front of their parents and parents in front of their children. These people are capable of that sort of brutality. Should you really be surprised that they'd be capable of using an ambulance as a machine of war?
Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, blamed Hamas for civilian casualties in Gaza.
We're dealing with an enemy here who is using its own population as human shields. That's what Hamas does. It's preventing Palestinian civilians from fleeing to the relative safety of the south. It is particularly concentrating them around their headquarters, which are located under hospitals and under schools. So in order to get at those headquarters, Israel will have no choice but to destroy those buildings and hope the Palestinian civilians will get out.
The Director General of the World Health Organization posted on social media saying utterly shocked by reports of attacks on ambulances evacuating patients close to Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, leading to deaths, injuries, and damage. We reiterate, patients, health workers, facilities, and ambulances must be protected at all times, always. Ceasefire now. There's still a massive need for more humanitarian aid in Gaza, with many essential supplies dwindling. People have begun using livestock to pull carts as their main form of transportation after fuel and gas ran out in Gaza. There are also several shortages of food and safe drinking water. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees says the average Palestinian in Gaza is now surviving on 2 pieces of bread a day, and only 1 of 3 water supply lines from Israel is operational.
We have thousands of people sheltering in schools. We had planned that we could cope with about 1,500 people sheltering in one of our schools. We now have over 4,000 people on average in the 147 schools, which are now operating as shelters. Conditions there are becoming desperate, particularly in terms of sanitation and access to basic services.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to reject calls for a ceasefire, saying it won't happen until hostages held by Hamas are released. He also said that Israel is continuing with all of its power and will block fuel from entering Gaza. These comments come after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Israel yesterday for the 3rd time since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. Blinken urged Israel to stop airstrikes so aid could enter Gaza temporarily and do more to protect Palestinian civilians.
We need to do more to protect Palestinian civilians. We've been clear that as Israel conducts its campaign to defeat Hamas, how it does so matters. It matters because it's the right and lawful thing to do. It matters because failure to do so plays into the hands of Hamas and other terror groups. There will be no partners for peace if they're consumed by humanitarian catastrophe and alienated by any perceived indifference to their plight.
Blinken is meeting with the Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister in Jordan. Qatar has served as a key negotiator in discussions with Hamas. The U.S. has credited the country for helping secure the release of at least 4 American hostages.